program is sponsored by Rogue Marketing. For 15 years specializing in business video marketing, websites, search engine optimization, Google Ads, and graphic design. www.roguemarketing.com, located with SAC TV at Bioport Mall in Schenectady.
Welcome to the Chapters Wrap. This is our first time here in this beautiful studio, so I want to welcome everybody for our new viewers out there. We have author David Pietrusza. Yes, thank you so very much for joining us today. And you've written so many books that your presence, it's such an educational experience for me.
Imagine what it was for me.
But talk about the passion of writing books, first of all.
Oh boy. I'll tell people that if you're really into a book, like a big epic book or novel or nonfiction, and you're really into it and it's like you've entered into a new world, well, imagine what it's like for the author.
Right.
Because think about a pitcher on the mound and how he's got to have that focus. And so you've got to have the focus on the book. You've got to be thinking about it all the time, every day. You're walking down the street, you're eating dinner, and all of a sudden you're rolling around factual connections or what makes this character tick,
right?
Or how you're going to phrase a sentence,
right?
What sequence the words go in,
right.
Or does the sentence belong? What more are you looking for? How are you going to find it? You go down into the rabbit hole, and you don't come up for a very long time. It's in many cases a solitary experience. Maybe if you're a journalist, if you're like Bob Woodward or something, then you're interviewing everyone.
Right.
But for the historian, everybody's dead.
Right.
There's nobody to talk to.
Right.
So it's between you and that screen and that keyboard. Then later on, you get into the editorial process,
right.
And it's back and forth, and then you hope for it all to pop.
Right. Well, it's wonderful. In your latest book, T.R.'s Last War, Theodore Roosevelt's The Great War and a Journey of Triumph and Tragedy, what gave you the wanting to do, the passion to do that?
Well, he's a great character. Not only is he the most interesting president, he's probably the most interesting American because he does so much. He's a rough rider, a rancher, an explorer of Africa and the Amazon, a naturalist, a great ornithologist. He's an author.
Right.
He writes, I don't know how many books, and they're not ghostwritten. He's a magazine editor and a newspaper columnist. He runs for mayor of New York. He's the police commissioner, civil service commissioner, Navy secretary, winner of the Nobel Peace Prize,
He's
the
a boxer,
Panama
right?
Canal. Yes, he's a boxer.
Yeah.
And he loses one eye boxing in the White House from that. He boxed in the executive mansion in Albany. So he does all those things. And then, if you're doing a biography, even if you've got like a 3-volume biography of him to do, or even a big thick one, by the time you get to the last period of his life, after he's run for president unsuccessfully in 1912 and exploited the Amazon at great peril,
right?
I think the biographers, the writers, the authors are exhausted by him, and the editors are saying, "Stop killing trees. TR's an environmentalist. Wrap it up." So this period tends to be kind of rushed through. As TR is an exhausting personality, the authors are often exhausted.
Right.
So there were some new things I was able to bring to this. It's a story of so you read the Bible, you read the Gospels, and you see that often parables, often words, not to compare myself with anyone, have many different meanings.
Right.
And so the words last war have different meanings here. It's World War I. It's the fight for preparedness. It's to get into that war and personally fight. It's the war against Woodrow Wilson. It's the war against his own declining health and body.
Right.
So there's all those things going on. And then, of course, the further thing, Triumph, where he's about ready to come back.
Right.
And if he lives to 1920, he could be president of the United States. and tragedy in so many different ways related to the war.
Yeah, you certainly capture so much in the book, and people might not understand out there. Some of the younger people, he was, like you mentioned, he was a New York City police commissioner.
Yeah.
Became vice president, then became president. He was the first president to fly outside the United States in an airplane, correct?
Well, no, he flies in. He's the first one to go outside the United States when he goes to Panama and inspects the canal. He is the first ex-president to fly.
Oh, okay.
And he does that in St. Louis, and it's only, for a matter of seconds or something. And you can actually watch a newsreel of this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he's pulling up in an automobile, and they ask him, and he's like, no. And then it's like, yeah. And then he gets in and he comes out, "Rawr, bully." So he's doing all these incredible things, and he's really the first modern president because he expands the power of the presidency and the federal government so much. He says, if the Constitution doesn't say I can do it, I can do it, which is like wrong technically.
Right.
But we have seen so much follow the expansion of the government and of the presidency that really he sets all that in motion. The reason, executive orders. What can we do with executive orders? We keep talking about now.
Right.
Theodore Roosevelt issues so many executive orders that's when they first start numbering them. 1,007 executive orders, which is an awful lot. It's surpassed by Franklin Roosevelt, but Franklin Roosevelt had a few years on him and a World War and a Depression. So TR was keeping very busy doing what he wanted to do.
Right. And if the younger people out there, what president would you kind of compare him to, or was he someone to himself at this point?
Oh, he's absolutely unique.
Right.
It's so busy and then trying to get back into the presidency and failing in 1912 and having so many adventures. There's just nobody even close.
Right. And he also wanted to come back later in life, come back and serve the country.
Well, yeah.
I mean, how did that go?
Well, when he turns the presidency over to William Howard Taft in 1908, and then they break on questions of the environment and appointments and antitrust actions, then he runs against Taft, splits the Republican Party, runs third party, gives the presidency to Woodrow Wilson. So it doesn't go well.
Right.
And when you do that, you tend to burn a lot of bridges in the Republican Party or any party. It's amazing that he is able to return to good party graces in 1918, early 1919. He doesn't have much of 1919 before he dies. But because he is this great patriotic force in World War I, and America, is all flag waving, then he's the man. And he was right. He was right that America and Woodrow Wilson were not preparing for a conflict with Germany, or also, if you want Germany to take your demands and diplomatic notes seriously, you better have a bigger standing army than like Chile or somewhere, or the New York City Police Department in terms of manpower. It was equivalent. We didn't have much of anything. We were flying French planes and British tanks. Even though we were supplying so many materials and manufactured goods to the Allies, we were very unprepared. Soldiers in New York Harbor on Governor's Island were training not with rifles but with broomsticks.
Right. Interesting. This book, a lot of books have been written about him. What's different about this book and your book?
It's different in the period it covers. It's different in its epilogue, which is so controversial that it got the book banned from the Theodore Roosevelt birthplace in Manhattan. Because as I was wrapping it up, I looked at the footnote, and then it's like, wait a minute. Now, some of his associates committed suicide, and his son committed suicide. Wait. And then, he wanted to commit suicide in the Amazon, and he always carried a bottle of morphine with him. in case he got into a fix, in case he would be of no further use to people. And then you combine sort of means, motive, and opportunity without coming to a firm conclusion, but laying out all the data where he was administered morphine that night. Did he still have that bottle of morphine to overdose with? He's so energetic, so up. You do not remember that he could often be very down. And you had his close friends like Henry Cabot Lodge and others say, everyone thinks he's so, up all the time. We know better. We know how down he can get. And then you take a look at the genetic factor, not just his son, but his grandson and granddaughter, his brother, a nephew, really a suicidal streak in the family. So all of those things I struggled with.
Right.
Am I going to report this to the readers? And then it's like, if I don't, I'm cheating them. Let them reach their own conclusion.
Well, that's great. So you knew going in it was going to be controversial, and some people wouldn't accept it then.
Yeah, because it's like, whoa, where is this coming from?
Right.
I was asking myself, whoa, and then it was coming in a rush, just a rush of that so much material could come in the last couple weeks before I had to hand the thing in, was like, this is worth noting, worth noting, and I think it is. It also paints a more complex picture of him. That I say, if in fact he overcame any impulse, if he or if he did not, this let us know the price he paid for his glory.
Right.
But if he did, well, this was his greatest triumph in his last war.
Right. Interesting. So you felt an obligation to share that story or different stories out there. Is that consistent with prior books that you've written too?
Sometimes I've asked myself, should I tell this story or not? And it's like, well, I found it interesting. I found it, it might be off the beaten path. But yes, it's interesting and it's informative, and let's go with it.
Interesting. The book is TR's Last War, and when he won the Nobel Peace Prize, talk about that time and the excitement at that time for him and his family and his colleagues around him.
Well, that's so ironic because he's the most militaristic of American presidents. He gives a talk in 1896 when he's Assistant Secretary of the Navy about there is no glory in peacetime to compare with that of war. He talks about, well, if we get into a war with Germany at that point, or Britain, he was willing to go to war with Germany in like the 1890s over Samoa, or Britain over Venezuela, and seize Canada, and says, well, if a foreign power bombards our eastern cities and reduces them to rubble, that would be worth it to teach Americans a lesson about preparedness. I don't think so. But so with that, he wins the Nobel Peace Prize for brokering a peace treaty between Tsarist Russia and Imperial Japan, who were fighting in East Asia over Korea and Manchuria. And he does that in New Hampshire at the Portsmouth conference there. And just remarkable. And he receives, of course, because he's TR, there's got to be a special twist, he receives the award when he's coming back from that big safari in Africa where there were thousands of specimens, i.e. carcasses, so many which were supplied to the American Museum of Natural History, that they have to farm these things out to museums all across the country. And at that, when he's between Africa and Oslo, Norway, picking up that award, the Edward VII of Britain dies, and he is representing America with that great constellation of crowned heads of Europe at that funeral, and he is at the center of the world stage again. He was Mr. America to the world for a good portion of his life.
Wow.
How do we deal with the turmoil and trouble we are faced with every day? How do we find the personal strength to move our lives forward against the many headwinds that seem to conspire against us. It isn't a secret, it's simply a journey. And that's life. Our goal is to help you map out your personal path to a complete concept of who you are and want to be. The thing is, this project requires money. We can't do it without help. So we're going to reward your support with access to a variety of sources and provide discounts on programs. Go to www.communitymediaservice.com and send us $20 to make the initial friend list, or give $50 and you'll be placed on the special friend list for ongoing benefits. Help us make this happen. Help yourself, help others. Join us on this special project. Go to www.communitymediaservice.com and click your choice, either $20 or $50, and stay tuned for more.
Now, you've written so many great books out there, and you've been involved with a lot of people in the community. If you had to pick 3 people out to have dinner with, who would that be? Who would you that be?
Boy, I think I got asked that one. Who they would be. One of the people would be someone you probably never heard of, which would be a composer named Ralph Vaughan Williams, who was one of my favorite composers, English. I'd like to ask him, where did all the music come from? You know, I understand where words come from. I don't understand how it works as a great composer,
Right.
like that, you know. And maybe Pius the 12th.
Okay.
My first pope.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure who the third person would be. Maybe, I guess, Calvin Coolidge.
Okay.
We'd see if we'd see what that kind of conversation would be like with Silent Cal. It would probably be pretty short. I'd probably ask for a recount.
That's great. Well, you know, you've been...
Oh, I wouldn't mind. With all your baseball connections, I wouldn't mind having lunch with Casey Stengel.
Ah, Casey Stengel.
The old professor.
The old professor. Talk about Casey Stengel. You've done a lot of books on baseball. Why? Is that a passion of yours?
Casey was when I first started following baseball with the early Mets, Casey was the manager. And I think just the force of his personality would help bring a historically minded person in, like myself. You know, he had gone all the way back to the game in the 19-teens, and suffered from so many setbacks.
Right.
You know, he was a dog as a manager with the Braves and the Brooklyn team. Not a success when he's brought into at a fairly advanced age by George Weiss to manage the Yankees. It's like, why are they bringing this loser in?
Right.
And then all the wheels.
Right.
All the wheels of, okay, we're going to use this guy in left field. You know, Yogi spends so much of his time in left field. He's moving players all around like on a chessboard.
Right.
And then, if you think that's complex, his explanation of it, of course, is super complex.
Right.
But I think he knows what he's doing the whole time.
Wow, yeah, he definitely does. And you have connections with Ted Williams. Briefly, talk about that relationship.
Yeah, when I was president of the Society for American Baseball Research, the big national research organization for baseball, SABR, you've heard of sabermetrics, got a call one day, or my office did, Ted Williams wants to meet with you. I was like, well, doesn't everyone? And it's like, okay, what does he want to meet with us about? About Joe Jackson, shoeless Joe Jackson,
Right.
and he wanted to justify or pick our brains about whether Jackson belonged in the Baseball Hall of Fame or not. And I was told by my executive director, well, I don't know if we have the budget to meet with Ted. It's like, we are the Society for American Baseball Research.
You got to find it.
It's like, you know, the powers vested in me include calling the next board meeting, and I say it's in Ted Williams's backyard. And so we went down there, and Ted, I was sitting right next to Ted like this, and one of the other board members said, Dave here is a writer, and he thought I was like a Boston sports writer. A writer? And then, no, he's not that kind of a writer, Ted. And he calmed right back down. And then later on, he said to me, he says, "You impressed me." It's like, I'm putting that on my tombstone, you know. So I helped him write his last book, which was a pictorial autobiography, beautifully produced book, actually. And also with some of his statements, like on his statement on Shoeless Joe Jackson,
right.
His manifesto on that. They called me in once. He was at some sort of dinner, charity dinner in New York, and he was going to be on Conan O'Brien. You can see on YouTube the interview. And they said, "You come up to his hotel, his suite, and you coach him. You coach him on what he's going to say on Conan." I'm thinking, yeah, I'm going to coach Ted Williams. Right. He asked me when I was doing the book, he says, I asked him, the picture of you were so thin. Where did the power come from? And he starts grabbing me. He says, "How did you hit? How did you hit?"
Right.
And I go, "Badly." But another fellow with me had actually was sitting next to me and said, and he had led the Appalachian League in home runs. And he starts grabbing him and showing him and all this. But to Williams, as great as the talent that God gave him, he said he worked and worked and worked and worked, and he swung the bat in batting practice until his hands bled. So, I mean, it is so important to apply yourself. A lot of people have talent.
Right.
A lot of people have more writing talent than I do, and you work at it.
That's a good point. I'm actually a psychologist by trade, and I work with a lot of young people. And I know a lot of young people either musically inclined, or they could do artwork, or they want to write, but sometimes they don't. What advice would you give young people if they want to write and to get their feelings out on paper?
Work at it and edit yourself incredibly hard. Be hard on yourself. I tell people I'm not the best writer in the world, but I'm a hell of an editor.
Okay.
And I edit the hell out of myself.
Wow.
Okay. I'll go through a draft 8 times, playing with everything, trying to make it sing. And also, if my first book, which was on baseball, I thought I'd have to self-publish it. And it's like, oh no, what have I done? If I have to self-publish it, I have to pay for every word I've written. Are those words worth paying for? If
Right.
I am, I took 25% of the book out. Found the publisher anyway. But I bet you that book was a lot better because that stuff hit the bricks.
Wow.
And often, in any process, there's a lot of material that's out of the TR book. I think 30 or 40,000 words got taken out of what was ultimately a 96,000 word book.
Wow.
It's over and over and over again. And one thing, when I'm going through it, maybe through 6, 7, 8 drafts, if I'm asking myself at the end of that process, does this belong? The answer is no.
Right.
Get rid of it. Don't fall in love with everything you've written. Don't think every fact. I was asked to blurb a book. I started to read it, and the guy had written he never met a fact he didn't like.
Right.
Not everyone is as interested as you are. When you are the most interested person in the world when you're writing that book.
Right.
Which means nobody else is that interested.
Right.
You don't have to tell them everything.
Right.
Don't tell them everything.
Right. Well, this has been a wonderful time. How can people get a hold of you or your book and TR's Last War? It's amazing. It's been out for a little bit of time, and I'm sure people really want to get their hands on it.
Well, it's available at Amazon or Barnes & Noble, a lot of bookstores still. And I have a website, www.david, Pietrusza.com. And I have a Twitter feed at DPIETRUSZA. And I'm usually posting some sort of comment on there or a and some information on where I'm speaking, or like here.
Okay.
I'm sure I'll do that.
Well, I want to thank you very much. And 2019 just started, but what's your goals and visions for the rest of the year?
Oh, gee. I might be doing some ghosting.
Okay.
Every so often I do some ghosting, which explains like a break in, when the books come out, or to hopefully to decide on what the next book will be, because I've got like 3 things bouncing. I've got offers from one house to do this, another house to do that, and maybe doing another one. Also, actually, what I really want to happen is to get the word. Charles Mathau, who is the son of Walter Mathau, has optioned by 1920, the year of the 6 presidents, with the view towards creating a miniseries, like a 6-part series for like HBO or one of those premium channels, and he wants to do it in conjunction with the 100th anniversary of the 1920 election.
Okay.
Which means he has a sort of narrow up window to make it work.
Right.
And but if it does, I think it'll be a fascinating series. The presidents in question are TR, FDR, Hoover, Coolidge, Warren Harding, and Woodrow Wilson. So there's an amazing cast of characters there, and a great backstory on the Klan, women's suffrage, prohibition, terror. There's a lot of bombings and murders and stuff in the era then. And just America is changing and really becoming very modern at that point.
Wow. Last thing, we might be doing some big event here in Cooperstown, and a baseball event around the Hall of Fame. Maybe you could be a part of that in some way, and all your history in baseball and your writings. So this has been a pleasure. I want to thank you very much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Come on back next week with the Chapters Wrap.